Hey there, kindred spirits. Thank you for listening to Kindred Spirits Book Club, the podcast where two grown-ass ladies geek out about Anne of Green Gables. I'm Reagan Duffy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kelly Gerner.
Hi, kindred spirits.
And today, we have a very special episode to share with all of you. If you are listening to this episode the day that it drops, this is especially for you. Did you know that today is Ella Montgomery's birthday? She would be 150 years old today, November 30th, 2024. It's pretty incredible that the legacy of books she wrote still continues to resonate with new generations of readers. And so it is so special to take this moment to celebrate Maud as a person and as an author. Before we jump into our episode, we thought we'd take just a minute to share our thanks to Maud Montgomery.
Ugh, thank you, Reagan. This is a great idea. Well, happy birthday, Maud, and thank you so much for writing the books of our hearts. Thank you for sharing Prince Edward Island with us and giving us Green Gables and Lantern Hill and Ingleside and all these special places that we get to visit in our memories. Thank you for showing us what it is to be brave and ambitious and loving and kind and imaginative. What a joy it is to get to spend so much time in your world.
Thank you, Maud, for giving us the gift of so many fictional girls and women for us to find ourselves in. 35 years or so after first reading Anne and seeing myself in her whimsy and bookish spirit, I keep finding bits of myself in character after character, or finding bits I'd love to aspire to. Valency's clarity, Anne's emotional journey to motherhood, Jane's independence, the story girl's charm, even Marilla's no-nonsense practicality, and Mrs. Rachel Lynde's keen instinct for gossip. Maud, you didn't know, I'm sure at the time, that you were also leaving us a way to find community with other women and with other readers of all genders. That discovering someone loves Anne of Green Gables or The Blue Castle or Emily of New Moon is often a shortcut to being kindred spirits. You've left us so many ways to connect with others. Your books have become a binding tie in our friendship through doing this podcast and have led us to find connections with so many others through your works. Happy birthday, Maud. So, kindred spirits, to celebrate Maud today, or whenever you're listening to this episode, take some time to reach out to a kindred spirit in your life. Take time to read a favorite passage or a favorite book of Maud's. Take time to enjoy the natural world, to celebrate the legacy of beautiful natural writing that she has left us.
Oh, absolutely. Happy birthday, Maud. And as a birthday present for all of you kindred spirits, we have something extra special today. So, as we've been discussing Anne of Ingleside, we've had lots of questions about why this book feels so different to us than those other Anne books. So we thought, who better to discuss this with than an Ella Montgomery scholar, Dr. Laura Robinson. We had a fascinating discussion with her. But before we get there, a really quick reminder for all of you, please go ahead and follow us on Instagram. We are kindredspirits.bookclub there for fun bookish content and peeks into upcoming episodes. It would mean the world to us as well if you would rate us 5 stars and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, or any other place you listen. That helps all the other kindred spirits find us. And now, without any further ado, we are going to jump right into our conversation with Laura Robinson. Enjoy, kindred spirits. Kindred spirits, we are so excited to introduce you to a very special guest and an absolute icon in the world of Ella Montgomery scholarship, Laura Robinson. Laura, welcome to Kindred Spirits Book Club.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, kindred spirits, we absolutely cannot wait for you to get to know Laura. So we're going to give you her academic bona fides right here. She is a professor of English and Women's and Gender Studies at Acadia University in Nova Scotia. She's the former visiting scholar at the Ella Montgomery Institute at the University of Prince Edward Island, and now she is the chair of the L.M. Montgomery Institute's Management Committee. She's published lots of articles on Montgomery's work, most recently on Netflix's Anne with an E in Ella Montgomery in Conversation About Children and Childhoods. With E. Holly Pike, she edited the volume Ella Montgomery and Gender in 2021. She acted as a consultant on Historica Canada's Ella Montgomery's Heritage Minute and the Inspiring Places Ella Montgomery Literary Tour in PEI. She curated a multimedia exhibit that traveled internationally over a 4-year centenary of the Great War entitled The Canadian Homefront, Ella Montgomery's Reflection on the First World War. She's also a consulting editor for the Journal of Ella Montgomery Studies. But Laura, we also just want to get to know you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Ooh, oh, that's exciting. I live on the top of the North Mountain in the Annapolis Valley. So I have an amazing vista that I wake up to every day and think, I can't believe I live here. I have 2 Siamese cats, Kipling and Selkie, and an Italian greyhound named Willow. I don't know. I love to garden. I love nature. I'm a real Montgomery person that way. Just give me quietude and solitude and outdoors and a book, and I am happy as a clam.
Oh, well, that definitely sounds like you guys would be excellent friends, wouldn't you?
Hopefully. Although, after reading her journals, one wonders.
Okay, then. Well, we're going to come back to that. So let's just dive right in. We often on the pod talk about Anne of Green Gables as one of the books that for Kelly and I both made us who we are. It was a formative book of our childhood. It was a book that connected us as friends. So we want to know, how did you discover the Anne books and Ella Montgomery? And what did that mean for you?
So it's so interesting. And you know, the Ella Montgomery Institute has been working on everyone's origin story for Montgomery, which I love. I don't really have an origin story like other people, which I think is interesting. So I grew up, I read Anne of Green Gables as a child. It was on my bookshelf forever. I'm from Nova Scotia, sort of originally. My dad was military, so we moved everywhere, but Nova Scotia was home. So I'm from the East Coast. I have red hair, but Anne did not speak to me as a child, which is really interesting. So when I was doing my PhD at Queen's University, I wanted to do it on Little Women because I loved Little Women with a passion, with a trembling passion. And what I wanted to do was find texts to show a genealogy, where Little Women came from and where Little Women went to. So Charlotte Young's The Daisy Chain, I used that series. And then I picked up the Anne of Green Gables series and thought that's a perfect, and then 3 different countries as well. Such a great PhD thesis. Well, so much was happening in the world of Montgomery right then. The journals had been coming out, so we were seeing a different side to Montgomery. As I reread her works, I thought, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe when I read this or had it read to me or something as a child, it didn't connect with me more. And I was just transformed. I got completely involved. I went to the first ever Montgomery conference in 1994. While I was still a PhD student, met Elizabeth Epperly, who, took my breath away. And the rest is history. I mean, I still love Alcott, but I kind of left her in the dust and started chasing Montgomery instead. Then I read her other works and I couldn't believe how amazing they were. And there's just so much out there, and more is becoming available to people through the work of people like Ben Lefebvre, who's putting together her periodical publications and things like that. And it's amazing to read it all.
Wow, that's really awesome. And you're right, kind of different in terms of starting with Little Women and instead making the jump to Anne of Green Gables. Kelly and I have talked before about how Jo March and Anne Shirley, like what they have in common and how they're different, and wondering a little bit about what Ella Montgomery was inspired in terms of Little Women. What kind of inspiration did she take from that? You can see the DNA a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a photocopy of her copy of Little Women, and you can see her marginalia, and it's quite interesting.
Oh, fascinating.
Wow. University of Guelph has it.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing to get a chance to look at. That is interesting, Laura. You came to her as a PhD student, and it does seem like these books are so inextricably wound up in at least my idea of my own childhood that it's interesting to me, this idea of coming to them later in life. But as Reagan and I have been moving through this podcast, we have been reading and rereading Montgomery books that we missed as kids, or we only read once and they just didn't really sing for us. And that has been such a fun project, right? Is revisiting some of these things. And I think Anne of Ingleside, which we're going to talk talk about a little bit more today is one of those. Like, I think I probably read it as a kid just to be a completionist, but I was like, this is boring.
Completionist. Yeah, I just reread all of her works this past year, which was really, I tried to do it in order, but I messed up a little bit. So they got a little out of order.
In
But for the most
publication
part,
order?
no, in composition order.
In
as she
composition
wrote them.
order.
I kind of wanted to see what was going on in her life and how it affected her writing. And so I wanted to read it chronologically to get a sense of that. So, and it was really interesting to read them back to back as well. Oof.
Since you just reread all them, I think you will have an answer for this at the ready. And this is just, we ask everybody, what is your favorite and least favorite Montgomery book?
Yeah, it's impossible.
It is
Isn't
a hard
it? Like,
question.
it's
Yes.
absolutely, it depends. I mean, people always ask me as an English professor, what's your favorite novel? And I'm like, whatever I'm reading at the time. I don't know. I mean, I love The Blue Castle. I think there's so much going on in all of Montgomery. I mean, the Emily books, a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I wouldn't have said they were one of my favorites, but then I just reread them and I thought, oh, this is dark and interesting. I honestly, I don't know. Whatever I'm reading. I love Kilmeny of the Orchard. No one else loves it. I love it. So, I mean,
Laura, you have to go back and listen to like our episode on Kilmeny of the Orchard, which is essentially like a 90-minute nastygram.
We spent a lot of it being like, this is wild, right?
It's kind of racist and it's a little weird, but the vocalizer is a man who objectifies a woman. I mean, I think there's some interesting stuff going on there. And we're going to come back to this conversation because I think some interesting stuff is going on for Montgomery. I think it's coming from a tradition more of the sensation fiction like Louisa May Alcott wrote, rather than the tradition of sort of moralistic writing that Anne of Green Gables kind of follows, but then explodes, right? I mean, it's just such a different genre. I mean, she's going dark into humanity and what humans are capable of.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. But let's go back a little bit to if you've recently reread all of them. Do you have a book that's like your least favorite Montgomery book from the enjoyable reading standpoint?
Interesting. Well, I don't know about that, about from enjoyable reading, but I think the one that never stays in my head is Magic for Marigold. Like I just reread it and I feel like I almost couldn't tell you what it was about. I mean, it's just, there's not much that I feel connected to in that novel.
Laura, I will tell you, I also just reread it because we were thinking about doing it for the season. And as Reagan and I were sitting down to talk about the season, I was like, I have nothing to say about this book.
Right?
I mean, in that it has a child narrator and it's like somewhat about childhood. Like maybe we could thematically tie it into some of these other books we're talking about this season, but also I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't feel memorable or it doesn't, I often walk away from novels and there's a scene that will stick in my head forever.
For
Handmaid's Tale. It's where she's laying on her bed covered in butter, like buttered toast, because she doesn't have skin cream. And she's saving her pats of butter. Like just stuff like that. Nothing in Magic for Marigold. I feel like I don't even remember the plot. Like it's just really interesting.
So then from Ellen Montgomery's work, are there any particular scenes or characters that are like the characters or scenes of your heart that you come back to?
That is a great question. It's so hard now, especially with Anne being transmogrified into so many adaptations, that then those visuals kind of take over the ones that you create from the text. I can't think of any off the top of my head because there's so many, right? There's no kind of standout. I mean, I think of Perry coming through the ceiling with no pants on in the Emily books, stuff like that. But there's so many of them. So I mean, that's the joy of Montgomery, the kind of detail that she provides for us all the time.
She really is such a cinematic writer. I'm sure she was not thinking of her writing that same way, but it comes to life so beautifully in your mind when you read it. Let's talk a little bit about Maud herself, and in particular, what was going on when she was writing Anne of Ingleside. We noticed that this book feels different to us from the other Anne books. We have been sort of identifying that as like a shift in tone. You might have a better way to describe it. That's kind of how we've been telling it to each other. The characters in this book, especially the people who aren't from Ingleside, seem so antagonistic and judgmental and petty. Like the children are cruel. Like there's this mean streak and a darkness through the book that doesn't exist in the other Anne books in the same way. There's elements of classism in Ingleside that seem a lot less apparent in other books. And just the way that the other characters, especially the Ingleside people versus the non-Ingleside people, relate to each other just seems to have a lot more friction than you see in some of those other Anne books.
I would suggest that Anne of Windy Poplars has a similar, you can see it there too. It's starting there, right? Because she wrote that one in 1936 and this one
Right.
published in this one in 1939. I think it's a massive shift. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to, years ago, I said, I'm going to go read all of Montgomery's works from beginning to end. And it took me until last year to do it. I think, so much is going on in Montgomery's life. One of the big pieces of the puzzle is she's no longer a minister's wife. So suddenly she has some sort of freedom to be a little more critical of her society. And it unpins her from this propriety that she's had to put front and center, because when she publishes something, people are going to be reading it as she's the minister's wife, as well as she's Ella Montgomery. So much was going on. And I just think she became more critical of her society and more fraught. It was like so much was going on inside her, and suddenly it was difficult for her to deal with it. So no longer a minister's wife, she started getting stalked by a woman that she labeled a lesbian in the 1930s. And it increased and increased and increased over time. And so throughout the 30s, she started reading about the pathology of lesbianism. And she diagnosed Isabel Anderson as a lesbian, much against Isabel's whatever. And she recorded it all in her journals. She wrote out letters that Isabel wrote her. She talked about all the things, but she kept going there. And she says she kept going there because she was worried that Isabel would do something to hurt herself, right? But she was lonely. She no longer had her friends close by or as many close friends as she used to. So that stuff's going on. And,
That's
there's a whole
very
thing.
interesting.
And so lesbianism was also very much in the public discourse, both in the States and in Canada at this time, because it was the way they got women back into the home after they got out of the house during World War I. They had to raise the specter of lesbianism. So after World War I, there were actually less women working outside of the home than there was before World War I. And women were afraid of being seen as masculine men, as women who were independent, earning their own money. So then look at Montgomery. Here she is, a woman who's earning her own money, looking after her entire family, and has a woman stalking her that she's labeled a lesbian. So what I see is that in her novels, those bosom friendships have changed tenor and everything's a little bit more fraught. So she's no longer just happy to be in love with Diana. It's a little bit more uncomfortable than that. By she, I mean a character like Anne. The female friendships are not the same anymore. And I think you really see it in Anne of Windy Poplars, where the girls are mean to each other. So you see that kind of meanness there. The Pringle family's out to get Anne, and Catherine Brooke is so difficult and a horrible person, but Anne wins them all over. In this time period too, she had such trouble with Ewan and her son Chester. So Ewan, of course, had mental illness that manifested in so many different ways. And Chester, her son, he was probably around 20-ish around there. He was getting into trouble. He wasn't going to classes. He was getting kicked out of school. They were trying to fix problems for him, getting him work with a lawyer, doing all these things. He got married in secret, which meant, which upset her. I mean, here we have a minister and his wife, and their son is up to shenanigans. And, as we find out through Mary Rubio's biography, he indulged in crime as well. And so that was all percolating there too. And she had her own illnesses. I mean, she suffered from depression likely and other illnesses. And there were economic troubles. She had been supporting the whole family. I mean, a minister's salary is not much. And they just bought a big, beautiful home in Toronto on Riverside Drive. It's quite lovely. No one would be able to afford that house now, let me tell you.
On an author salary.
Yeah. Although I have to say, regular humans live there, and they must wonder, because I'm sure all kinds of Montgomery people slow down and check it out all the time, right? So, I mean, her life was really, really difficult. Oh, and then to add even an amazingly horrible layer to it all. So here she is, someone who's been a world famous writer almost from the get-go after Anne of Green Gables was published, mostly well respected. She moves to Toronto where she can be part of the Canadian Bookmen's Association. And Canadian literature was really at a time period of people trying to figure out what it was, right? We're a little bit behind American literature in terms of a literature of a nation. And of course, the modernists came in and valued a different kind of writing and then looked at her and said, so then she was kind of cut out from the literary scene. And so at the end of her life, she was not held up with the same kind of respect and adulation, well, certainly by fans, but not from the academic intellectual circles. And so that weighed heavily on her as well. And she just kept rereading and rereading and revising and revising and revising her own journals. So she was caught up, and if you've read her journals, you know what a negative valence they have. So she was caught up in this process of revisiting sort of the worst pieces of her life. And she kept revising them over and over and over again.
Oh my
so
gosh.
she was like in a downward spiral or a really negative spiral. And yet she's still writing this novel, which is amazing.
Laura, provides so much context. And I'm thinking very specifically about a conversation that Reagan and I had when we were talking about sort of Anne's role as like an angel in the house in Ingleside. Here is this woman who is so interesting, has so many, as you point out, friendships and interests and so much going on for her throughout the rest of the series. And then all of a sudden she is reduced to simply wife and mother and hostess in a way that feels so unfulfilling. But in the sort of cultural context that you're giving us in terms of sending women back to the house after World War I, and in terms of what she was dealing with in her own family life, this sort of professional disappointment in not being recognized as the author we know she was, I can see it. I can see why that's what she wanted for Anne at that moment. Like she just wanted it simple.
Except she's also, do you guys know the phrase taking the piss? It's a good
yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. She's kind of taking the piss, right? Like she's showing that Anne's life is kind of next to hellish because of the whole Christine Stewart thing. Yeah, like it's drudgery, but also her whole life is in this, and she thinks that Gilbert doesn't fancy her anymore, and he's totally smitten with Christine Stewart still. And that whole narrative of jealousy, which totally undermines Gilbert. I mean, I think she's really exposing a lot. So we go in thinking Anne of Ingleside is going to be one of the Anne books, and she kind of does that. There's a moment where Anne stands in front of a window and she's repeating something that Christine Stewart has said to her. I think it's the final bit of the novel. She's repeating something. It's quite a family. So Christine Stewart says it to her sarcastically or meanly, and Anne says, it's quite a family. Anne repeated. It might even be the last words of the novel. And I think it's interesting because what we look for is Anne repeated, right? And what we hope for as readers is Anne to repeat. Montgomery knows that. That's why she's picking up Anne again at the end of her life when they need money, and filling in gaps in Anne's story, because she knows we want more Anne. It's like Alcott refusing to marry Jo to Laurie and instead concocting Professor Bear, who I quite love. But, I'm sort of with everyone in that upset that she didn't marry Laurie, of course. But I think, she's showing us this impossibility of what Anne has become and what Anne is. And she's showing us instead this crazy world. And it is, the negativity in here is so palpable. When I just reread it, and of course it was sort of one of the more recent ones that I read because I read them in order. The scene that really got me was the Cassie Thomas scene. I didn't remember that at all.
We're obsessed with that scene. We talked about it at length just the other day. We think it's fascinating.
It is so fascinating. So here you have Nan, who is happily part of probably the wealthiest family in Glen St. Mary. Someone tells her she's been switched at birth.
Which really, like the fact that she even believed it, where you're like, she didn't ask any more questions about that? She couldn't. It was a promise. She had been sworn to secrecy.
It's because of the red hair, though, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So, which I think is hilarious.
Right. And she doesn't have red hair and Di does. So therefore she must not be.
Right. So I think that when I read it this time, I was gobsmacked. I was just like, she is leveling such a criticism at her society and its imbalances. And she's doing it using Anne because she knows people are coming to Anne for something. And that it's like the Anne story all over if Anne hadn't been rescued. Because to see this dire poverty and squalor, and then for Nan to just be plucked out of it and it's all okay, and then we can all carry on. Anne says her sweet little words. And I think she knows what she's doing to us, that it's something unsettling. And this is what I think Montgomery does over and over and over again. She gives us what she knows we want. And thankfully, because gosh, don't you love the ending of The Blue Castle? Don't you love the ending of House of Dreams? Oh my God. These things have to happen, even though they're outrageously coincidental or you can't even imagine. But she unsettles us. She gives us what we want, but it's too unbelievable. It's Shakespeare did the same kind of thing, right? Like, oh, here we are all happy. Thank God some twin showed up and wasn't really dead and could marry this woman rather than another woman marrying the woman. Anyway, I'm thinking of 12th Night here. So I think she unsettles us and she knows she can do that and do it really subtly. And I think that's her gift and her power to do that.
That really makes me think, because Kelly, this is another one that came up when we just did our Anne of Ingleside recap, was there's a scene in the middle of Anne of Ingleside where it's right after the quilting bee, which mostly just like all sorts of fun town gossip. And then Walter asks her a question about
Peter Kirk
and the funeral. And then we get this horrible story that isn't connected to anything else. Anne is just remembering this horrible thing of going to this funeral where the sister of Peter Kirk's first wife stands up and talks about how horrible he is and what an abusive husband, what a terrible husband he is. And everybody is shocked into silence. And then his current widow says, thank you. And Anne is completely unsettled by it. Even remembering it 12 years later is like shocking to her. It's such an interesting thing thrown in this middle of the book, in this like inconsequential gossip fest that is the quilting party, right? And we were wondering, what was she doing with that? Because it doesn't
love that scene
for the rest of the story, right? Like there's nothing else that comes out of that.
I think she was doing so much because one of the things I just reread it today because I wanted to be prepared for this. If there's something that sticks out at me about Anne of Ingleside, it's that. Yeah, it's that moment, right? Yeah. So what I find really interesting, having just reread it today, that one scene, is the way the men talk about it afterwards. They're so ludicrous. They do not see what has happened. So it's like she's sticking it to the menfolk. They can't see what the depth of these women's pain, what an horrible abusive patriarch he was. They can't see any of that. But the best part of it is at the end, she says, that is no story for children, right? Because she tells Walter she's not going to tell him the story. And then thinks about it. The story is embedded in Anne of Ingleside and then says, that's no story for children. So remember too, she had just been a writer and then somewhere along the way, she became a writer for children, whether because of capitalist forces in terms of marketing books or the way tastes changed and it reflected backwards, not sure. But it's like she's ensuring that her book is not going to be taken as something that's appropriate for children. She's embedding it in there.
Isn't that so fascinating? Yeah. And especially because we talked about this when we talked about Anne's House of Dreams, right? The Blue Castle is talked about, the only book that Ella Montgomery wrote for adults. But when you read these books, even though I read most of them as a child or as a teen, The House of Dreams, there's so many of these books that are not specifically books for children. It doesn't mean children didn't read them, right? But so many of them, they're from adult perspectives about adult lives. And certainly certainly some of her books are from the perspective of children and about children's lives, but it's very interesting that she tried to make this last book, or the last classic novel, she tried to throw in there, and this is not a children's book, with this story of domestic violence.
And domestic violence is woven through all the books.
Yeah.
All of her work, right? It starts with Anne of Green Gables. I mean, Anne is passed from house to house as a domestic laborer, as a child laborer, and witnesses domestic violence, alcoholism, like who knows what else. So it is there all the time. So in some ways, if we look through Anne of Ingleside backwards, we sort of get a more fulsome impression of what Montgomery's up to all the time. Maybe she's at the stage of her life where she doesn't care to try to mitigate it anymore, which awesome.
Wow. Yeah, that brings up the difference between Glen St. Mary and Avonlea, right? Avonlea is almost very wish fulfillment. It's this lovely town. And even though Anne gets off to a rocky start with Mrs. Lynde and the flowers in her hat at church, she doesn't stay an outsider for very long. And you got the Pye family, but like nothing really super significant. Overall, as a town, the stakes are always low. It seems like there's a huge value of neighborliness. It's very idyllic. And I think that's part of the reason why people going to Cavendish is so much of a lifelong dream, right? It's seeing a storybook come to life. Glen St. Mary is not that same town. We even talked about that when we read House of Dreams, and we're talking about Leslie's story. Did nobody else help her? How is Leslie struggling so much that barely able to make ends meet, and with this man that she's taken care of, and nobody but Miss Cornelia cares about any of the poor people in this town? Like, it just feels that way. And even more so once we get to Anne of Ingleside, where anybody else we meet from Glen St. Mary is not very nice.
And there's that huge class divide. I mean, as you point out, Laura, the Blythes are likely the wealthiest family in town. And that Nan story illustrates this really well, but it's really throughout the book. You know, if you aren't a Blythe from Ingleside, it seems like you're sort of like living on the edge, right? Like, people are really struggling out there, and it's not sugarcoated at all.
Yeah, you posed the question to me ahead of time, so I had time to think about it. I hadn't really thought about that before, and I find it fascinating. I know that people in Leaskdale feel that Rainbow Valley is an area in Leaskdale that she writes about. So Leaskdale, Ontario, of course. So I don't know if maybe in her head, she didn't have as solid an image of Glen St. Mary as she did of other places. Maybe, and I'm just trying to think of timelines of when she wrote things. Would she have, she would have been in Leaskdale. So maybe there's something there that it's more of a mishmash rather than an ode to Cavendish that Avonlea is. It is interesting though. And now I feel like I have to go back and read Rainbow Valley and Anne of Ingleside again to try to get a sense of it. Because even in Anne and Windy Poplars, you get a sense of Summerside.
You do.
Yeah. So
certainly all the graveyards in Summerside. We have a very clear picture of the graveyards.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting.
Yeah, we definitely felt like, and Ingleside, even as a house, it doesn't feel like the same kind of, I don't know, like you don't get that same feeling of place from it the way that you not only have done through Green Gables, but even like Patty's Place. And as I said, even Windy Poplars. So you really feel like you could picture Windy Poplars.
Yeah, the only thing I can picture of Ingleside is the porch.
The porch.
Because I feel people sit on the porch a lot. Yeah, I know. It's interesting. I wonder if it's because I don't want to diminish her artistry here, but she's kind of churning them out, right? At this point. So, and she is revisiting Anne, I think probably a little under duress. I mean, I think, as she said, she's dragged at Anne's chariot wheels. Like, she doesn't want to always have to write about Anne, but it's economically favorable to her and her family to do so. And I guess we're kind of glad she does, because now we have these other pieces of the story. But I wonder if she just wasn't living it as much as she was the other ones, where she's recapturing something from her own life or capturing something from her own life. Yeah, which is probably why we don't feel Anne the same way too. I mean, it's just, she's much flatter.
Yeah. The fact that she maybe felt like she had, I mean, if we leave out Ingleside and Windy Poplars, and we look at the original kind of 6 books in Anne's arc, there is this kind of narrative conclusion around Rilla of
Mhm.
Ingleside and the way that it all connects beautifully. And then going back and having to fill in pieces, those were not pieces that were truly missing. If she had needed those pieces, she would have written them earlier, right? So she's going
Yes.
back to that.
Except I wonder if she felt a need for them later. Because I think one of the things that must have been weird for her is, and I feel like there's something in the journals about this, but I can't, don't quote me on that because I don't know for sure. But she was part of the rallies like Rilla was to get young men to sign up for the war, as was Ewan. And then she had to go minister to the families when the bodies came home, right? So I'm wondering too if Rilla couldn't be the end of the story after several years, you know, and she thought about the impact of the war and because it was devastating. So I think maybe she
interesting.
had to fill it in ahead of time and do some more work there. I don't know. I mean, Rilla still is the end of the story,
Right.
but maybe Anne of Ingleside problematizes it a little bit more than
Yeah.
Right. We see Jem being like a young knight, being so heroic in his own little way. In Ingleside, we see Walter being brave in his way. And so that just sort of makes the pain of their experiences in Rilla like that much more profound.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah.
I also wonder a little bit, you had mentioned that her son was going through some really difficult things as a young adult at the time that she's writing it, because Jem is a very picture perfect little boy in Ingleside. He is like the perfect little son in so many ways. And whether there was something that she was doing for herself in writing her son's young childhood in this way. I don't know.
It's not even just that he's
Therapist.
perfect. He's incredibly moral. Jem is an incredibly moral child. He's set up with moral dilemmas and he makes sophisticated choices.
Interesting. Well, and of course she had Stuart, who was really, from all accounts, a very moral, upright, smart, wonderful, sweet, thoughtful child. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There's a moment in her journals. And remember, I said she's revisiting them and revisiting them and revisiting them, not only rewriting them, but then editing and scratching out and slicing out pages and putting in pages. It's quite something.
Sounds so psychologically painful.
Right?
I
know.
can't imagine doing that.
And then think about like what this says about how much she wanted to protect or control her legacy, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's over words sometimes. I've spent a lot of time with these journals.
Yeah.
But there's one moment where she, as a young mother, is writing about this beautiful baby boy that she has and how her hopes and dreams. I'm not going to remember it perfectly, but something about her hopes and dreams that he will always love her. Maybe he's come and said something to her like, "Mommy, I love you," or something like that. How she hopes this will always be the case. And then she writes, because this is what she did too. She comments on her journals as she's going back and forth from future years. It's like if only I knew, or, something like that, 1936. I know, right? So it's really distressing.
It is.
I mean, this was such a pain for her, like a heart wound that she just couldn't get over, to have a son who was like this. And I think she worried that it was an inherited mental illness, right? Because Ewan had these problems. And
Fascinating. Okay, so I'm a therapist, and the way so like that, I like talking about looking at some of these things from that angle, and that is fascinating because I spend a lot of time with clients talking about the way we tell ourselves the story about what is happening to us is very important in how we understand and emotionally experience what's going on around us. So it's fascinating to me that somebody is going back to her journals, and I know she's doing it also from a literary perspective, going back to like the emotional experience she was having at the time that she wrote them and revising them and editing them and commenting on them. Like, just from a therapeutic perspective, it's kind of fascinating the work of recontextualizing your experiences at that time. Like, people go back and read their journals all the time, totally fine. Like, that's interesting to sort of see where you were and where you are now and how you got there. But it's fascinating to go back and like edit them back up and change them and add context that probably puts them in a different light. Like, it's just very, like, from a therapeutic perspective, that's really fascinating. I wouldn't suggest that it's super healthy, though, people do all sorts of things
and it gets them where they got to go. But
And in addition to that, she decided, so she had the 10 volumes of handwritten journals that she had and burned her earlier version. She had rewritten them all and then added to them. She wrote the rest of her journaling she did on little slips of paper, and then she put them in the journal after the fact. And then she decided she wanted to have 2 copies. So one was left to Stuart, the good boy that she could rely upon to publish after her death when he thought was reasonable and to protect people. But she felt that Chester should have one too. So she typed one up in addition to going back and editing and scratching out and doing stuff to the handwritten ones. Well, she was using the handwritten ones, which is why there was probably another level of editing. She typed up a version and then edited that version. The typed up version was going to be the one that was acceptable for publication. And it's fascinating because she has a part slashed out and she goes, like, obviously take that out. And then she writes in the margin, keep this in, right? Like so she's just kind of going back and forth all the time. And I mean, I think you can see the turmoil that she's experiencing there. Like she hasn't landed anywhere. It's almost like the core sense of identity is shape-shifting all the time for her. And it's heartbreaking to see. I mean, to me, the journal page that speaks the most to me, it's probably in journal 5. It's like right in the middle of all the journals. And so what she does normally is she'll write something, decide she wants to take that out. She scratches it out so you can't see what's written. And then she blanches it, probably with lemon juice. I took a physicist with me, and so to help me read these.
wow.
So he tested a bunch of different ways people had of blanching paper, and he figures it was the lemon juice because of how it appeared under the different lights he put on it. And normally she would write over it, and she did it fluidly. So the end of one page, she wrote the thing, and then it fluidly caught up to the next page. But this one she did not. So it's like a mute page. You see the vestiges of the scratching out, but it's been erased with lemon juice. And I feel like that is the moment. It's like she's speaking to us from the grave. There's more here. There's more here, and I feel like this is Anne of Ingleside. This is the fraughtness that is in Anne of Ingleside. That's why it feels uncomfortable when we read it. That's why Anne is a little disappointing. It's because Montgomery herself was a woman who was almost at odds with herself at this time in her life, probably throughout her life, but she was maybe given more liberty now that she was no longer a minister's wife to kind of go there.
Yeah. And to let that discomfort come through on the page, to let that tension show up on the page.
Yeah. To expose the patriarchy. I mean, she was doing that all the way along. I mean, let's be fair. Gilbert in Anne's House of Dreams was, well, she was right, he was wrong, but he's a bit of a pompous.
Well, we've got Miss Cornelia all through House of Dreams, who are all like,
thank you for Miss Cornelia. I can't help but think of the redacted page in Maud's journal, sort of in the same way as I think of that Peter Kirk section of Anne of Ingleside, where it's like, this is the big story. This is the big secret. This is the thing that everybody knows and no one will say out loud. This is the thing that's not appropriate for children. That's not appropriate for a children's author. This is the thing that we don't speak of, but we know anyway.
And it's women's rage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Montgomery just constantly pokes at something and flips it over. And we quickly see all the bugs skittering. And then all of a sudden there's flowers and roses in front of it. And it makes it okay. But we saw the bugs there. There's some stuff.
Well, and one of the things that Reagan and I have talked about before with this is that Maud is so specifically writing to female contemporaries, specifically writing to the women who she knew would have been her readers, that a lot of the times, we talk about getting so much more out of these books as adults than we did as children. And I think that's exactly it. We can see those bugs skittering now. We can understand what's really happening here. We can understand the very real danger. We can understand how fraught this is in a way that her readership would have been able to at the same time. But it misses kids and, it misses men readers.
So when we did Anne of Windy Poplars, right, which, as you said, like that's where you start seeing a lot of this tension that really is so apparent in Anne of Ingleside. When we were talking about it, of course, we were talking about all of these terrible families that Anne meddles in, and they're played for laughs, but so many of these situations are actually highly abusive, right? But they're still really played for laughs in that Cyrus Taylor with the immense silent treatment, right? He's horrible. I have a little bit of a bad habit of sulking.
Yeah, I have a temper, and so everyone in my family is always walking on eggshells. Or Mrs. Gibson, who, is lording things over her 40-year-old daughter. Her 40-year-old daughter's afraid to do anything. All of these stories of like horrible dysfunctional families, but it's like, LOL,
Right.
this is all for a laugh. Look at these quirky people.
Right. But then what's interesting is the Ingleside is there's a lot less of that. I don't know. To me, the humor is like, it seems like she's taken a level of the humor off of it, right?
Totally.
Like there isn't humor in the way that the kids are mean to each other, or like in Windy Poplars, you can kind of see where it's that plausible deniability of humor,
Yes.
right? Like I'm saying something difficult, but I'm putting it in this situation where it's supposedly funny. And it feels like with Ingleside, we've gotten another layer of that plausible deniability pulled off.
Right. She doesn't even want to be funny anymore.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, she loses her humor. You're right. As she carries on there. I mean, that would be interesting to look at, tracing the humor, because that's the joyous thing about Anne of Green Gables. But certainly the Emily books aren't nearly as funny. They have their moments, but Emily's not like Anne. I mean, it's not the same
Right.
kind of joyousness, right?
Emily doesn't see the funny side of things. That's the thing about Anne, is that all of her scrapes, all of these things, she always can laugh about it after the fact. That's kind of why you don't feel like you're laughing at her. You feel like you're laughing with her. That's why she is such a fun character to read. And her emotions are so pure, seems too simple, but her emotions are really authentic. And so her joy is very authentic.
Yeah, and it feels like joy. And definitely the Anne of Ingleside has lost that. I remember when I was doing my PhD, I wrote something because I wrote about the Anne series, and I wrote something about how disappointing Anne was in Ingleside and how it was just motherhood and having babies and something else. And my supervisor, who was a recent mother, was like, there's nothing boring about this, Laura. Like, I just really wanted to put pressure on it. And I was like, whoops, sorry.
But here's the thing, right? Like, I'm a mom and I think my kid is amazing. I think she's like the coolest, and I really, really enjoy being her mom. But this Ingleside does not. Anne says she has a lot of joy. And let's be honest, even if you really, really love being a mom to young kids, it's a slog. Like, young kids are great, but they are a lot of work. Let me tell you, middle schoolers, where it's at, they're great. Like,
Good to know.
young kids, like the age that her children are, this is a slog of an age. Doesn't mean there's not joy, doesn't mean there's not a lot of love in there, but it's a lot of work. And kids that age are a lot of work. Having 6 kids that age is a lot of.
Can't imagine.
You don't get that authenticness from Anne. It's this very
It's sappy.
it's
Yeah.
sappy, where it's that, oh, she just wants to kiss their little knees and, tousle their little curls, and her heart is so full. And we want the parentless orphan to have a loving, fulfilling family. We want that for Anne. But there's something about the way that she's writing about Anne's motherhood in Ingleside. It feels corny. It feels sappy. It feels like it's checking a box. It doesn't feel authentic.
One of the interesting things about Montgomery's writing that maybe is missing in Anne of Ingleside is how sort of, I mean, can we use the phrase trauma informed? She
Sure,
seems
yes.
to be, right? Like Anne, a child that's experienced such trauma. Emily, in the peak of her trauma, made more traumatic by this horrific family that's trying to decide what to do with her. And I mean, Montgomery seems to really understand that trauma, especially when it's not met with a loving environment. Like Marilla is not the person. I mean, she turns out to be the person and it's all okay. But I think maybe that's what's missing in Anne of Ingleside is the trauma-informed piece, because Anne has just transmogrified into a sort of trope of good motherhood, of saying the right thing. Instead of, I don't know, it would be more interesting if something pushed her buttons, which wouldn't it?
Yeah.
You would think.
It really would be. And it's so oversimplified that, like, we've been talking about how the kids' stories are all the exact same. The kids leave Ingleside, have some sort of misadventure, usually based on like a misunderstanding or them not understanding the context of their world. And then they come home to Anne and she basically kisses it better. And so that's it. So they are out in the world having these little adventures, having these little traumas, right? These are very upsetting events for the children, but they come home, they have that safe place to land. It's all just sort of meaningless, right? There's like, oh, and another cute little day for the Blythe children.
Yeah. And in fact, it's the Merediths that become more interesting.
Oh, yes.
For sure.
Yeah, we can't wait to talk about Rainbow Valley because there's a lot. There's a lot going on in Rainbow.
Yeah, no, the Merediths are fascinating. I love those kids, especially the girls.
Well, we talked about House of Dreams. We talked about that kind of through a trauma-informed perspective when we were talking about Leslie Moore, and also talking about the additional trauma of losing Joyce for Anne, who lost her mother, right? And that the dual perspectives of the way she writes in Anne of the Island, when Anne finds out about her mother's experience with her babyhood, right? And how that was connecting for her. And then she kind of, you get to see that there's that trauma repeated in losing Joyce. She so wanted to be a mother. This connects her to her mom. And now she's lost her baby. And then having the corrective experience of having the joyous birth of Jem. And that felt very authentic. Like you could see the connections between Anne's childhood trauma and her experience of becoming a mother, but we don't get to see it in the act of her mothering. And I think that's what we're missing. And we have to unpack a lot of your childhood and your experience with your parents into parenting your child, right? Like we have to, it's all connected. And we don't get to see Anne doing any of that. We don't get to see her wrestling at all with how do I be a good mom to these young children? She doesn't have any memories of being mothered as a young child to
And in fact, only of mothering. So, I mean, you'd think having twins would push her domestic laboring buttons from when she had to raise all those twins pre-Green Gables. And, you know, Montgomery must have thought of that. Otherwise, why give her twins?
Twins, right.
So, and we would recognize it, right? The reader goes, oh, look, twins. Remember? It's like she's skirting or flirting with it, but not wanting to land there. Or maybe she just can't. Maybe she's just so overcome in her own life that she needs to stay on the surface more than she was able to in other novels.
For sure. Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this. One of our through lines, I think, for this season is going to be justice for Shirley, the poor abandoned child who gets no point of view chapters ever, gets no lines, but it's constantly referenced how his birth was so scary and Anne was so sick afterwards. We don't know whether that was physically, it was a rough birth, probably some of both, or postpartum depression, which also would be a real thing. But I'm always thinking like that's a far more interesting story than Rilla's birth. Or Rilla's birth is clearly a corrective experience from Shirley's birth. We never got to see. And then Anne basically checks out of parenting Shirley. She just lets Susan parent Shirley.
I was just going to say, Shirley's Susan's boy, right? Like,
yes.
So, which also is interesting. I mean, that is
it's
just
so interesting.
Like, he's still in the house.
Like, we don't know what to make of Shirley at all. He's such a strange, like, little ghost character to us.
Why create this baby that doesn't show up at all anywhere?
But I feel like this is almost, oh my gosh, what was that show that Leonardo DiCaprio showed up in as a child? Family Matters with Alan.
Growing Pains.
Growing Pains.
Growing Pains.
As like the cousin when you need the cute kid and
you had the 3 kids. What was wrong with that? And then I think they felt like the viewership was dropping, so they had to throw a new kid into it.
Yep.
And it turned out to be Leonardo DiCaprio, which is really weird in retrospect. But when they do that kind of thing, in order to keep the interest going, although she sort of did it all at once. I don't know. There's just so many kid characters. I'm like,
there really are.
Mary Vance, the Merediths, like all the Ingleside kids. I mean, I need
you need a chart
or something.
We can absolutely just keep on the same trajectory. I feel like there's so many more interesting things to say about this book. But if we want to pivot to talking about your work at the LMMI, maybe this is a good time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Fans, enthusiasts, readers of all stripes, collectors, academics, we are here for all of you. So the Alum Montgomery Institute is based at the University of Prince Edward Island. And of course, there's a lot of holdings, Montgomery holdings in the library at UPEI, and people are welcome to come check them out, which is very exciting. But the alumni is here really to promote the life and works of Montgomery in any way that we can. What we do is host an international conference every 2 years, and we have a visiting scholar every 2 years. That conference is sort of theirs, although other people help organize it, of course. And we sometimes have things like virtual roundtables in the year in between. People come to us with questions. We connect them with other people in the Montgomery world. Someone just came to us, a fan, wants to know about first editions of, can't remember which Anne book it was, but we connected her with a collector who lives in Minnesota. So it's that we're sort of a place that people, if they have questions or queries, can come to us, but we also foster an academic engagement. As you know, you did a cross podcast with the Modcast. The Brenton Dickinson's Modcast is sort of part of our operation, as is the Journal of Alum Montgomery Studies, which is an academic journal, but also not just an academic journal. It's an open access multimedia, so you can do different types of media in it as well. It can be peer-reviewed articles, which are the academic ones, but also creative writing and people's responses to Montgomery. So all kinds of people could submit to it or find interesting pieces to read and or see or watch in it, because photography's in it, paintings, poetry, all kinds of different things. So we're pretty excited, especially because it seems that Montgomery studies and interest in Montgomery just seems to be exploding right now. The Canadian Mint just released Loonie with Montgomery on the colored in the coin. It's an enamel, colored enamel. It's beautiful. There's a documentary being made. There's so many things happening because it's the 150th. There's so many people wanting to work on Montgomery, do things with Montgomery. So I feel like it's such an exciting time, although I'm a little overwhelmed coming in just the first couple of months. And I think there's just going to be so much happening in the next couple of years around Montgomery, because so much of the work that's being done now will be coming out in those couple of years and will give us more fodder for things to look at and talk about and engage with, which is so exciting.
I didn't know there was a documentary in the works. That is very fun news.
Yes, it's the Royal Geographic Society and production company, which is Royal Canadian Geographic Society, which is so exciting. She was there at the conference, Sunny Lee.
That's
just
right.
at the beginning. Yeah, just at the beginning. Do you remember? Yeah.
I do remember there were cameras wandering around. I wasn't sure if that was for a particular purpose or if that was just you guys always videotape it, because there was such a multimedia. I mean, this is another thing. Listeners at home, Reagan and I were lucky enough to be able to go to the conference. We had a fabulous time, but there was a way to attend online as well. Everything was televised, everything was live streamed. It was so interactive, it was so multimedia, it was so accessible. That was one of the things that really, to me, coming in, really feeling like an outsider, maybe like we were a little underqualified to be there, really felt so welcoming. There was just a sense of like, oh no, this is really for everybody. If this is an area of passion for you, this is a place for you.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that you felt that way. That's really important to us, because from the beginning, it's been like that. I often say it's the best academic conference in the world. And it's because it's a place where enthusiasts, collectors, and academics come together. And I feel this might not be true. I'm an academic, so I might get it wrong, but it feels like there's no hierarchy. Like it feels like we're all out there on the same page. And it's so fun to connect over Montgomery. And I just feel like I have all these lifelong friends now from going to these conferences every 2 years. So
everyone we met was incredible.
It's so remarkable. And I think it's because we're playful as well. I mean, without being necessarily like corny or something.
Yeah, we truly had a blast. And as Kelly said, this is a fun podcast for us, and we do it from a fan perspective and rereading them as adults. And so we didn't know if we we were very cautious at first. We didn't know whether we had opinions that felt like they were interesting to add or anything to the conversation.
By the last day, we're like raising our hands.
Me, call me.
What I've heard tonight, your opinions are amazing. So, yes, of course. And I think that's the interesting thing. Like, as an academic, I can come at something from a very academic-y kind of English literature perspective. But what's interesting is to sit and hear someone who's like, well, I read this 20 times, and this is what it means to me, because that I feel is so much more important than the genre, or maybe the two are important together, right? It
Yeah.
gives me another like layer that I think is completely invaluable in order to understand Montgomery and her universe and how important she is to so many people. It's
To so many
incredible.
people. You really get a sense that this is just an incredible labor of love for everybody who is involved. Specifically, we're wondering, is there anything you're working on now that you would love us to know about? Anything that you want us to be able to share with our listeners? Or maybe another way of putting that is, are there things that you or the Institute are doing that are accessible for fans and that people might want to get in on and experience?
Well, we're going to be revising our website and hopefully getting more material on there and making it more accessible. But we certainly have cool collections that are available through the website. The Ryrie Campbell collection, you can go in and see all kinds of materials and postcards that Montgomery wrote to Macmillan, J.B. Macmillan in Scotland, are just fascinating Montgomery adjacent material, but still Montgomery material, I guess. I think there's just so much. The manuscript, the Anne manuscript that Emily Worcester and Elizabeth Epperly did, I don't think we've connected it to our website, but it's from Museums Canada. If you just go annemanuscript.ca, you'll come to it. And it's the actual manuscript that's been digitized and then transcribed. And then they have a complete apparatus around it. And what they've done is they've gotten all kinds of scholars and Montgomery people to read the chapter title. So every chapter title is read by a different person. I know,
That's
it's so
so fun. Okay, which
It's
chapter
so
title
fun.
did you read?
I can't remember for the life of me. Was it Tempest in a Teapot? Maybe? I'm not sure.
Great chapter. That's a
I
great
know,
chapter.
right? Yeah. And so they had people write articles and do different things. So it's such an amazing treasure trove. And there's other projects like that that are kind of in the works, which is really exciting. And I think Canada, the federal government, Museums Canada, the National Library, various institutions like that, Heritage Canada, is really starting to understand this is not just some flash in the pan children's writer from rural Canada. She is a writer, capital W, of import, and it's not just a tourist thing. This is something that is really important to Canadian identity. And so I really feel that some pretty exciting things will be happening in the next while.
Oh, that's so exciting. We are very excited to come back, hopefully, to the conference again, to keep on, now that we've made this connection into some of these resources and into some of this more academic way of thinking about Anne. Like, we're just so excited to keep plumbing these depths, and there's just so much more. Every time we
more. Yeah.
So much more. I mean, it's amazing. Oh, one of the things that just happened. So we've had a few donations recently to the alumni, but through like Robertson Library at UPEI. One of them was, so years ago in the 70s, a filmmaker did a documentary on Montgomery called The Road to Avonlea. And he approached Stuart McDonald and got a whole bunch of material from Stuart McDonald back in, I think, 1972. Well, he died a couple years ago, and his widow has recently gone through his materials and found a box that said Stuart McDonald. And it was all the stuff. So that treasure trove of letters, some from her childhood boyfriend, Will Pritchard from Saskatchewan, all the letters he sent her tied with a little bow, just so much stuff has now come to the alumni thanks to Montgomery's heirs who passed it along. So stay tuned for that, because a lot of it hasn't been well preserved. So they're going to take their time and handle it very carefully and digitize it all. So we'll all be able to see. I know there's scholars salivating right now and they just want to get in there, but the archivists are like, stand back in due time. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting to get that material.
That is really, really amazing. Okay, so we want to just shift a little bit and we want to talk to you a little bit about you teaching both Montgomery, and then you mentioned that you've been doing a class, teaching a class on Anne adaptations, and would love to just know a little bit about that.
Yes, I'm teaching a course. I get to teach Montgomery in my children's lit class. And what I didn't anticipate this year is that all the students that are in my adapting Ellen Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables are also in my children's literature class.
Oh, so
So
you can't,
they're
you
going to be
can't double dip.
I know. I didn't think about it, right? Like it just didn't occur to me that of course those would be the same students. I don't know why it didn't occur to me, but it's a graduate course. The Adapting Anne is a graduate course and an honors course together. So it's fourth year students and then master's students. So in that one, I'm teaching 3 graphic novels that just recently came out. One is Anne of Green Gables, and I wasn't going to teach that one because it's really just Anne of Green Gables, but it's so
gorgeous.
It's so beautiful. I know, it's so beautiful that I'm like, no, I have to teach this.
We did a whole episode on the 3 adaptations. We love them as well. But that one, I remember one of the things we said to each other is we cried. That adaptation made us cry. We know the books, we know what happens, but those illustrations are so poignant. I mean, the emotionality, it really brought it to life in a whole different way.
Yeah. So I had to add it in August to my book list so the bookstore could order it. And an adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, sort of. And then Anne
of West Philly.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
So good. So good.
I know. So I'm really excited. I think the students are quite excited. And one of the other things we're going to do in this course, so I don't know if you've seen the anthology that's come out, Acorn Press, which is a PEI press. It's a whole bunch of short stories from very different takes on Anne, sort of like
I bought it at the
zombies.
conference. I have not yet read it.
It's utterly delightful. There's a whole dystopia Hunger Games one. There's a drag queen one. It is the best. So I quickly added that to the course. And so what I'm going to have the students do is each pick a short story. We're going to do a modcast with Brenton, and we're going to invite Acorn Press or see what Acorn, if they want to get involved in it. And I'm super excited about that because I think it's really important to teach students about the importance of public humanities and engaging with the public, because they often are like, what do academics do? It's not relevant. It's completely relevant. It is so important. So, yeah.
I think that is so important to realize that being sort of evangelists for this work is what makes it worth it. If you're just sitting in your room reading, that's a joy in and of itself. But then when you get to be in a whole conference full of people who also love it, or turn on your podcast mic and talk to other people who are going to fall in love with it, or make your own art and adaptations out of the work, and then that reaches still more people. I mean, that's like the whole point. It's great.
It is great.
Well, and that's been one of so Kelly and I started this podcast as like a friend project. What is a project that we can do together as friends? And Anne of Green Gables.
Very Montgomery. That is such a Montgomery thing.
Right?
Like a storybook club.
That's exactly right.
This is like our little story club. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, one of the fun side effects, because like Kelly was my like Anne of Green Gables friends, like she would go down that rabbit hole with me anytime. But one of the fun side effects of doing the podcast, which we did not expect anybody to listen to but our mothers, to be honest with you, and we've expanded past that. And though we're still always really delighted when people like we don't know interact with us, and we're like, oh, you listen to our podcast, like, and you're not related to us. That's amazing.
You like Anne of Green Gables too? Who knew?
But one of the fun things about it has been, so I have, like some friends and some family members who listen because they are my friend or they are my family member, and I have hooked them on Anne as a result, right? They're like, I listen to like support you, but now I'm in. Now I want to read it. Now I want to know what's next. What book do I read next? And that's been a really fun thing because, again, it's that let's share some of those things that light us up with other people and why it's so exciting. And it's not going to, it's not going to be for everybody, but I think that's such a fun way to just interact with the world.
It is. It's amazing. I love that so much.
Okay. I feel like we are kind of naturally winding down. So maybe I will say something at podcast beneficial on that.
Laura, do you have anything else we didn't ask you think you'd love to add?
No, I think this has been an amazing conversation. I have loved every minute of it. Thank you so much.
And I hope you know that when we get to Rilla next season, please, you are going to come back, right?
We would love it.
Okay. Yes, please.
You won't be able to keep me away. I'll be
Fabulous.
like, hey guys, what's happening with Rilla?
Laura Robinson, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us today, talking all about Ella Montgomery, your work with the Ella Montgomery Institute, and Anne of Ingleside. I think Reagan and I both have a new appreciation for the novel now, and I hope our listeners do too. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I had a ball, and I can't wait to come back.
And that's our conversation with Dr. Laura Robinson. We hope you learned as much as we did and had as much fun as we did with her. We will put links to the various resources that she shared with us in the show notes, so go ahead, check those out. And stay tuned, kindred spirits, because next episode we are going to switch over to discussing Rainbow Valley, the 7th Anne book. Next episode will be our in-depth recap of the book, so if you haven't read it or it's been a while since you visited Rainbow Valley, please tune in. Rainbow Valley is a rich and beautiful text, and we cannot wait to get into it over the next few episodes with you. Make sure you're following us on your podcatcher of choice so you know the instant a new episode drops, and don't forget to rate us and review us. Thanks so much, kindred spirits.
Bye, kindred spirits.